November 17, 2017, 4:08 p.m. EST. Donald Trump's America First foreign policy is starting to undercut progress at the annual talks on fighting global warming. The U.S. president's vow to walk away from the landmark Paris Agreement on climate change and spur fossil fuels has encouraged countries from India to China to wonder why they should make sacrifices at 2 weeks of discussions held by the United Nations, which finish Friday in Bonn. While envoys from almost 200 nations will make progress implementing the Paris deal at this year's meeting, those involved in the process say the 3-decade-old talks are in danger of drifting in the absence of leadership from rich nations and the long-promised $100 billion a year in climate finance for the developing world. This is the worst moment for the Americans to start behaving like a 5-year-old all of a sudden, Christian Eller, a German member of the European Parliament who speaks on EU and US relations at the climate change talks, said in an interview. The leader of the Western world is stepping out of the multilateral framework used to tackle the most dramatic problem the world might be facing in the next 100 years. Old divisions emerged between richer and poorer nations. India, whose pollution levels are rising faster than any other industrial nation, stressed the need to include equity in the discussions, allowing it to keep expanding its emissions. China sought to differentiate responsibilities between developed and developing countries, a move that would expand its wiggle room in meeting commitments. Even the leaders of France and Germany showed a split as they attempted to lead a diplomatic charge to keep the global warming fight on track. French President Emmanuel Macron called for a minimum price on carbon pollution while German Chancellor Angela Merkel defended her country's use of coal and the need to preserve jobs in industry. There was little progress from rich nations in saying when they'd achieve the goal of advancing $100 billion a year for developing world climate projects, a target they've promised to achieve by 2020. Some of these richer countries paint the U.S. as the bad boy, but privately they don't want to do much more on these issues either, said Alban Meyer, Director of Strategy at the Union of Concerned Scientists, an advocacy group. Negotiators in Bonn this week are likely to make progress on ensuring nations transparently report their greenhouse gas pollution and actions to combat climate change which they pledged under the Paris Agreement in 2015. Designing a process in 2018 that will review whether countries are actually making progress on the actions they committed to in Paris. Allowing countries to link national carbon markets, building an international trading system for carbon credits. This is the worst moment for the Americans to start behaving like a 5-year-old all of a sudden. Voluntary pledges that countries made in Paris 2 years ago aren't enough to meet the target they set to keep global warming to well below 2 Celsius, 3.6 Fahrenheit, since pre-industrial times. A degree of warming over the past century already has been blamed for making storms stronger, adding to the frequency of floods and droughts and raising sea levels.